Dear viewers, before you start, we kindly ask you to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Every day we tell gossip and secret stories from insiders. Leave your opinion about this story in the comments. We wish you a pleasant viewing.
The TV studio was flooded with spotlights, mirrored panels reflecting the tension in the air. There are 2 chairs, 2 microphones, and 2 rivals in the center of the stage. On the left is Karoline Leavitt, confident, focused, with a hard look capable of breaking through concrete. On the right is Jasmine Crockett, with ostentatious confidence and an icy grin, ready to join the fight. The moderator greeted the audience with restraint and gave the signal to start. It became clear from the first seconds that this was not going to be a polite exchange of opinions. It's going to be a fight. Karoline, Jasmine began, leaning forward a little. You represent the camp that believes that America should return to the past. But we live in a new age. You are denying progress, denying the rights of people who have finally started to get a voice. Karoline chuckled, not a bit of confusion. Jasmine, do you call this progress? Are the disintegration of borders, rising crime, uncontrolled spending, and a culture of cancellation your progress? America was strong when the rules were clear and the state was limited. You want a state that intervenes in everything. I want an America where people can build their lives without being dictated to from above. Crockett frowned, but her voice remained calm. What you call dictation is an attempt to fix systemic problems. Not everyone starts with equal starting conditions, and it is the state that should take this into account. Do you think it's fair to take away from the workers and give to those who just learned to ask? Leavitt interrupted. Your party has turned the aid into a trap. People stop working because they get paid for doing nothing. This is not support, this is bribery. There was a barely noticeable murmur in the hall. Crockett tried to straighten her position. You're demonizing the poor again. It is such statements that divide the country. Democrats don't pay for inaction. They support those who have suffered from inequality. Karoline turned abruptly to the audience, as if she was going to put every spectator on the jury. And at the same time, they give money to illegal immigrants, finance gender experiments in schools and close the mouths of dissidents. You call it support, and I call it a betrayal of the country's interests. The moderator tried to get in a word, but Karoline had already gone on the offensive. Tell me, Jasmine, do you really think that a collapsing economy is a normal price to pay for inclusivity? When small businesses are suffocating from taxes, and the working states are losing factories. We are investing in the future. Crockett tried to object. In green energy, injustice, v. Chinese solar panels and chaos on the border? Leavitt interrupted her. How many more millions do you want to let in without checking, while our schools, hospitals and streets are bursting at the seams? Crockett finally lost her temper. That's xenophobic, Karoline. Your rhetoric is a danger to democracy. Democracy doesn't die from the truth, but from hypocrisy, Leavitt replied with icy confidence. And that's exactly what you imagine. The hall froze. Karoline's words hung in the air like a fist hitting glass. Jasmine looked away, as if trying not to show how much she was hurt by the last statement. But Leavitt already knew that the blow was accurate. You are so afraid of the truth that you are ready to call any criticism xenophobia or racism, Karoline continued, now addressing the audience directly. But the real discrimination is when a working person cannot feed his family because his taxes are spent on programs that do not bring any benefit. Jasmine narrowed her eyes. What you call useless saves lives. Assistance to families, nutrition programs, affordable medicine. Which is now impossible without insurance for $1,000 a month, Leavitt interrupted. Do you call it affordable? We are fighting for accessibility, despite the resistance of your party, Crockett replied with emphasis. You are blocking initiatives only because they come from Democrats. Politics is more important to you than people. Karoline leaned forward a little, and there was a hint of metal in her voice. No. Honesty is important to me. And you use the words, justice, and equality, to hide your failure. Your ideas sound beautiful, but in reality they destroy jobs, hinder business, and encourage addiction. This is not help, this is poverty management. Crockett glanced briefly at the camera, trying to seize the initiative. I represent Americans who struggle every day. You represent billionaires and corporate interests. No, Leavitt replied with cold certainty. I represent those whom you have forgotten, the average American. A worker, parent, or small business owner. You call this a billionaire interest because you don't understand how real people live. You live in a bubble of big cities where your every tweet is applauded. And the country, outside of these bubbles, is suffering. The moderator tried to turn the conversation to the following topic. Let's move on to the issue of foreign policy. How do you assess the current position of the United States in the world? But Karoline wouldn't let go of the subject. No, let me, I'm not done yet. We must tell the truth. Jasmine and her party are trying to rewrite the very definition of America. They destroy traditions, weaken institutions, and all this under the guise of progress. But people aren't stupid. They see rising inflation, they see jobs leaving, and crime rising. They see who is defending the country and who is only defending their political ambitions. Crockett tried to take the initiative. You're talking in slogans, Karoline. People need solutions, not empty accusations. Then answer me, Leavitt said sharply. Why is there a humanitarian disaster on the southern border under your party? Why are billions going abroad while our veterans are sleeping on the streets? Why does your president refuse to acknowledge the failure of his policy? Jasmine was silent for a second. This pause was enough for the audience to understand that Karoline was in control. Your president? Jasmine raised her eyebrows. Our president is the legitimately elected leader of the country. And your rhetoric is a direct way to undermine trust in institutions. Karoline grinned at him. Institutions do not need protection when they are in operation. But when the government turns into a bureaucratic monster that promotes party interests under the guise of democracy, it is impossible to remain silent. And let's be honest. What is happening under the current administration is not leadership. It's a surrender. Jasmine didn't back down. You're just repeating Trump's words. All the same accusations, the same cliches, the same rhetoric of fear. I'm repeating what millions of Americans see and feel, Leavitt retorted sharply. It's you who repeat ideological mantras, as if you work for TikTok and not for the country. Your words sound beautiful, but your politics are decadence. Jasmine jerked her chin up. Maybe you should remember that America is not just about white suburban areas, Karoline. It's diversity, it's different cultures, it's a struggle for equal rights. America is not about identities, it's about ideas, Leavitt snapped. Freedom, responsibility, law. You are replacing these principles with new ones, feelings, resentments, and social justice, which divides people by skin color and orientation, rather than uniting them into a nation. The audience burst into applause. The camera focused on the faces of the audience. Some nodded, some muttered, but there were no indifferent people. The moderator sighed, realizing that control of the debate was slipping away. Colleagues, let's get back to foreign policy. A question for both of them. Do you support the current level of assistance to Ukraine? Karoline didn't hesitate. No. I believe that American money should serve American citizens first. We have already spent tens of billions on a war in which we have neither a strategy nor an end goal. And while we're sending weapons overseas, our own South is turning into a gateway. Jasmine narrowed her eyes. Would you prefer Putin to win? I'd prefer your president to explain exactly what we're doing there, Leavitt snapped. And as long as he does not do this, I am against spending taxpayers' money on other people's conflicts, forgetting about my own crises. It's irresponsible, Crockett said softly but tensely. You are playing into the hands of America's enemies. Karoline turned to her with a cold smile. No, Jasmine. You're playing into the hands of chaos. When you weaken the economy, encourage lawlessness and impose your morality on the country, this is undermining national interests. And believe me, America's enemies see this better than anyone. Jasmine sighed heavily and folded her hands in front of her, as if trying to keep the remaining arguments from falling apart. But Karoline could see that her opponent was losing her footing. And she wasn't going to give her a break. You're accusing me of playing up to my enemies, Leavitt continued, but the real threat to America is internal weakness. And this weakness is not because of Russia or China. It is because of your policy, the policy of concessions, the policy of servility, a policy where priorities are feelings, not strength. You're living in an illusion, Crockett said, narrowing her eyes. The world is changing. America can no longer dictate terms. We need to be part of a global community. Karoline raised an eyebrow and leaned forward slightly. A global community? And what did it give the average American? Jobs in China? Energy dependence on wind turbines that don't work in a snowstorm? We had global values until you turned them into an agenda. Jasmine flushed. Do you want us to live in a world where America is an isolated fortress that denies change? I want America to be independent, respected and strong. Not apologizing for what she is, Leavitt replied, her voice resonating through the room like an alarm. You call it isolation, and I call these priorities. The moderator tried to bring the conversation back into the framework. Okay, let's summarize the interim results. A question for everyone. What do you think is the main difference between your approaches? Karoline didn't give Jasmine a second's head start. The main difference is honesty. I tell people the truth. Not all problems are solved by law, not all troubles can be filled with money, not all feelings are more important than facts. I stand for a strong America, not a wounded one. I don't promise miracles. I offer freedom and responsibility. Crockett pursed her lips, then spoke with careful firmness, and I'm offering justice. And America cannot be great while millions live on the sidelines. You're afraid of change, Karoline, because it requires giving up privileges. But democracy is not about fear. This is development. This is a forward movement. Leavitt chuckled. Democracy is when everyone is equal before the law, and not when some receive special conditions and others are silenced. You call my views fear, and I call yours a utopia that ruins everything we've come to through hard work. And yes, Jasmine, I'm not afraid of change. I'm only afraid of one thing. That people like you will continue to call collapse progress. There was silence in the hall for a second. Jasmine wanted to say something. She opened her mouth slightly, but she didn't say a word. This moment has become symbolic. The audience felt that the advantage was obvious. Jasmine took a deep breath, gathering her last strength for a counterattack. You talk as if everything in this country was perfect until the Democrats came to it. But let's remember that it was your camp that led the country to riots, to the storming of the Capitol, to a split. Karoline calmly straightened up. Do you really want to talk about the split, Jasmine? The split did not begin on January 6th. It started when you started dividing people into groups based on skin color, gender, orientation, and beliefs. When did you start defining oppression by Twitter fashion rather than reality? When the police became the villain and the criminal became the victim. You're twisting the point, Crockett interrupted. We are talking about systemic injustice, about the need to hear from those who have been ignored for centuries. And as a result, only they are heard. Leavitt did not let her finish. And the American worker? White, black, Hispanic, it doesn't matter. The main thing is that he works, he pays taxes, he doesn't shout, he doesn't demand. You made him guilty just for living by the rules. Crockett tensed, but her voice faltered. This is a simplification. We are fighting for equality. Not against anyone, but for everyone. Then why does your struggle mean that schools teach children to hate themselves for their skin color? Why does your progress mean that a man can enter the women's locker room? Why is your justice a violation of those who just want to live in peace? The hall buzzed again. The front row applauded. Leavitt could feel her words penetrating the audience. Every sentence hit home. She leaned forward, looking directly at Jasmine. You are not for equality. You're in favor of a rematch. Only now the whole society is playing the role of the oppressor. And it's dangerous. Jasmine, realizing that she was losing emotionally, tried to take a step towards rationality. Good. Let's be specific. What do you offer in return? Cancel assistance to the poor? Close the border and leave the refugees to die in the desert? Bring back the coal economy? Karoline nodded, as if she had been waiting for this. I'm offering jobs, not benefits. I propose law, not chaos. I'm suggesting energy independence, not dependence on weather conditions. And yes, I suggest stopping illegal migration, because real refugees deserve an honest system, not a flood of cartels and human trafficking. That sounds cruel, Crockett muttered. You sound naive, Leavitt replied. The world is cruel, and a country that refuses to admit this loses everything, its economy, culture, and security. I want an America that doesn't apologize for its existence. And you want an America that always repents for not being perfect. The audience was no longer just applauding, they were jumping up from their seats. Even the moderator, trying to intervene, looked confused. We need to finish. The final word is 1 minute for each side. The camera turned to Crockett. She stood up, looking at the camera. I believe in a country that can change. Where no one is forgotten. Where the weak are helped, not pushed away. Where there is a place for everyone. We must move forward, together. She sat down. The last round of applause was polite, but not loud. Karoline stood up. Her voice was like steel. I believe in a country that is not afraid to tell the truth. Who knows the value of freedom? Who doesn't sacrifice her fundamentals for temporary popularity? America does not need to be redone. She needs protection, and I'm here to protect her. The applause was deafening. When the cameras went out and the floodlights slowly began to dim, there was still a hum of voices in the hall. The debate was over, but the tension between the two women seemed to only grow. Backstage, Karoline Leavitt calmly took off her buttonhole, surrounded by her assistants. Her face was calm, her gaze steady, her movements confident. Jasmine Crockett, in turn, moved away towards the dressing room, exchanging short phrases with her press secretary. Annoyance could be seen on her face, not so much from what she had said, but from the realization that she had failed to seize the initiative. Karoline dominated, and worst of all, it's reasoned. You nailed her, one of Leavitt's assistants whispered with a slight grin. I was just telling the truth, she replied, as if it were the most common thing. Meanwhile, a real storm was already unfolding in the media space. Fox News has released a push notification. Karoline Leavitt schools Jasmine Crockett in fiery debate clash, full breakdown tonight at 9. MSNBC, on the other hand, focused on Jasmine's latest line on equality, with the headline, Crockett defends progressive ideals against GOP hardliner Karoline Leavitt. Twitter, or X, as it continued to be called for old time's sake, exploded. The hashtag Leavitt debate victory tag took the first place in the trends. Users wrote, "This wasn't a debate, this was a demolition." Leavitt came prepared and fearless. Crockett looked stunned. No soundbites could save her from that beating. I may not agree with Leavitt on everything, but damn, that was leadership. At the same time, liberal commentators tried to overplay their accents. One of the popular bloggers stated, Leavitt is aggressive, disrespectful and operates with half-truths. But in the media war, the predators are winning. We need to rethink our strategy. Meanwhile, Karoline was already giving a short interview at a makeshift press booth in the hallway. Do you feel that you have won? The reporter asked. Karoline lifted her chin slightly. I feel like I've said something that millions of Americans are afraid to say. And if this is a victory, then we are moving in the right direction. Crockett said that your rhetoric is toxic. If the truth is toxic, it means that the country has been sick for a long time. And it's time for her to recover. At that moment, Jasmine slowly walked out of the dressing room. She stood against the wall, listening to Karoline speak in front of the cameras. Her face tightened. Anger boiled up in her, not only at her opponent, but also at her own impotence in key moments. Her assistant came closer. We can try to play through the morning shows. To position you as balanced, peaceful. Leavitt looked sharp. No, Jasmine said softly. I'm going live tomorrow, and I give you the answer. Publicly, hard. The assistant looked at her in surprise. What do you mean? I'm not going to be a calm alternative anymore. If she can be aggressive, I can be aggressive too. There's a new game tomorrow. Jasmine turned around and walked towards the exit. Her face was focused. The debate was over, but the war was just beginning. The next morning started not with coffee, but with the headlines. CNN. Crockett hits back after Leavitt's brutal takedown. I'm not backing down. The New York Times. After a sharp debate, Leavitt rides populist wave, while Crockett shifts tone. Twitter continued to burn. By morning, the hashtag had changed to hashtag Crockett strikes back. Videos from yesterday's debate intersected with new clips of Jasmine on the morning show, Wake Up America, where she commented on the incident for the first time. Yesterday I heard more than just political arguments. I heard a voice with fear behind it. Karoline Leavitt is afraid of change. But changes are coming, and I won't get out of the way just because someone is talking louder. The host nodded, but noticed, however, many noted that you did not respond to some of her sharp attacks. Jasmine interrupted. Because I'm not going to stoop to the level of threats and ultimatums. But if she wants aggressive play, she'll get it. I know what I'm fighting for. And now she's going to find out. Meanwhile, on Fox News, Karoline Leavitt was already sitting in the studio of Fox and Friends in a cream jacket, completely calm, confident and ready. You have heard that Crockett is preparing to give a tough answer. What do you say? The presenter asked. I wonder if she will finally voice at least one specific position? Because so far, all I've heard is a set of emotions, Leavitt retorted, and if she thinks that a loud tone replaces logic, let her try. I'm not hiding. But you were really tough. Was it intentional? It was necessary. The country is tired of polite rhetoric that hides failures. America needs someone who speaks plainly. Without filters. That's all. On the sidelines, Crockett's staff was feverishly working on a new performance. The speech written at night was being rewritten. Jasmine was going to go live with a statement, more aggressive, with a less restrained tone, with specific attacks on Leavitt. We'll show her connections to far-right groups, one of the advisors said. And we'll reveal her statements about women and minority rights, another added. We need to make her defend herself, not attack, the spokesman concluded. Jasmine was sitting by the mirror at the time, looking at herself. There was fire in his eyes. Today I will remind her what it means to be a woman in politics. Not just strong, but dangerous. And at Leavitt's headquarters, preparations were underway. One of the analysts put fresh polls in front of her. 9% support among independents. More than 100,000 letters and donations were received in Congress overnight. Some of the most ardent critics began to give her restrained praise. But she will try to strike personally, said the chief of staff. Either by family or by biography. Let him try, Karoline replied calmly. I'm ready for that, but she doesn't have the main thing, understanding why she's here. But I have. I'm not just a candidate. I am the answer. She got up and headed for the exit. She already had a new interview scheduled for prime time. The second round was starting. Almost a week has passed since the first debate, when two women, Karoline Leavitt and Jasmine Crockett, turned a political clash into a real duel of beliefs. And so, the Civic Now TV channel announced the resounding return of both to the same venue, an unofficial but hot one. The talk show, The Real Arena. The format was simple. An hour live, without a script, without speeches read from paper, only one moderator and an open dialogue. The studio was decorated minimally. 2 armchairs facing each other, a round table between them. The lighting was soft, but the tension was acute. The audience was sitting around as if in a ring. The cameras caught every gesture. Karoline arrived first, calm, focused, in a strict navy blue jacket. She walked past the makeup artists without saying a word. There was more than just confidence in her eyes. She was ready for battle. Jasmine appeared a minute later, in a red dress, smiling modestly, but there was tension in her gait. She knew that her reputation was at stake. After the last meeting, she had no right to look weaker again. The moderator started right away, without any unnecessary foreplay. Welcome. We won't waste any time. The first topic is immigration. And the one who caused the storm with her statement will start. Miss Leavitt. Karoline nodded slightly, thanks. I repeat, open borders are killing America. This is not hyperbole. That's a fact. We're losing control, we're losing security, we're losing resources. We need to know who is entering the country, why, and on what grounds. Jasmine wasn't expecting an invitation, and you keep repeating slogans. No one talks about open borders. We're talking about humanity, about the reforms. That America is a country of immigrants. A country of immigrants, but not a country of lawlessness, Leavitt snapped. You support a policy where millions pass without verification, without documents, without any responsibility. This is not humanitarianism. This is a surrender. And you want to put people in cages and build walls. Crockett retorted, raising her voice. I want people to come legally. According to the rules. The way thousands do it, respecting the country rather than violating its laws. Karoline replied harshly without blinking. The moderator interrupted. The next topic is economics. Especially inflation and rising prices. Miss Crockett? Jasmine sat forward a little. Yes, inflation is a problem. But it's global. And Biden, despite the criticism, has done a lot. Reduced the deficit, brought back jobs, and lowered the unemployment rate. Karoline laughed, a short, cold laugh. I'm sorry, but do you seriously call this a success? Gas prices are higher than under Trump. Products are getting more expensive every month. People live on credit to buy eggs. And you call that a victory? These are the consequences of a pandemic and global crises, Crockett objected. You always find an excuse, Leavitt said sharply. But people don't eat excuses. People eat bread, and it's more expensive. You're talking about economics from the office, and I'm talking about economics from the street. Jasmine tilted her head to the side. And you speak as if everything was perfect under your president. It was as if there were no tax breaks for the rich, no shortages, and no political chaos. Karoline leaned forward. Do you know what the difference is? Under Trump, people felt that the country was working for them. And now, against them. And that's what you call progress. There is a tense silence in the studio. Even the moderator was silent for a second. One last question before the break, he said. What would you do to America if you became president tomorrow? Jasmine answered first. I would build a country where no one is left behind. Where skin color, background, or status don't get in the way of getting a chance. Where justice is not a word, but a deed. Karoline didn't move a millimeter. I would rebuild the country that you are destroying. I would return respect for the law, the strength of the economy, and pride to everyone who calls themselves an American. The moderator announced a break, and both women stood up at the same time. Their eyes met. Jasmine whispered, You're playing hardball. But I won't break down. Karoline replied coldly, It's not a game. This is a fight for the country. And I won't back down. The break ended, and both women returned to the studio. The atmosphere became tense. The audience sat in complete silence, realizing that the second half of the broadcast would be even sharper. The cameras turned on. The moderator opened the laptop and looked at Karoline and Jasmine. Thank you for coming back. We will continue. Next topic. Reproductive rights. Abortion. He paused. Miss Leavitt, your position is a strict prohibition. Explain why millions of women have to submit to your view of their bodies. Karoline sat up straight in her chair, her gaze steely, because it's not just about a woman's body. It's about a child's life. I protect the most defenseless. Killing at will is not freedom. This is a moral disaster. Jasmine immediately exploded. Murder at will? Do you hear yourself? Is a rape survivor a convenience, in your opinion? Is a fatal pregnancy a moral disaster? You don't even try to understand. You want to be in control. Karoline leaned closer to the table. I want to protect you. And yes, I believe that human life begins at conception. Do you call this control? No. Control is to impose on women the idea that killing is a choice. It's not murder. Crockett retorted sharply. This is health. This is a right. You are not a doctor. You are not every woman's mother. You are a politician who has decided to use morality as a cudgel. And you're an advocate of cultural anarchy, Karoline snapped. Under the slogan of freedom, you are pushing society into an abyss where there are no values. And yes, I am a woman. And that's why I know that a woman's power is not in the right to destroy, but in the ability to protect. There was a murmur in the studio. The moderator could barely keep the broadcast from exploding. Good. Let's move on to the next question. Racial justice. Systemic racism. Ms. Crockett, you argued that right-wing forces don't understand what it means to be not white in America. Because they really don't understand, Jasmine replied defiantly. They don't know what it means to live with fear, to be profiled, to receive less, even if you are better. And when we talk about it, we are accused of sacrifice. Karoline shook her head. No one denies the story. But you're turning history into an excuse for an eternal struggle. America doesn't have to bow to the past forever. Today we have a chance to build a common future, but you want to share forever. We don't share. It is your side that has created laws that destroy black communities. Your side refuses to acknowledge that racism is not a myth but a structure. Karoline's chin jerked up, and you refuse to admit that personal responsibility is not an empty phrase. That success does not come from quotas but from work. I don't believe in racial sacrifice as a political platform, and I will not allow you to impose it on the country. That's easy for you to say, Jasmine hissed. You are a privileged white woman who thinks that everything is solved by labor. For some of us, the starting line is not a field but a ditch. Then you confirm that you are not fighting for equality. You're fighting for a special status, Karoline snapped. And I'm for equal rules. For everyone. The moderator looked at the timer. There is one last topic left, the future of America. Political, social, ideological. What is your path? Jasmine took a deep breath. America must be inclusive, progressive, We must stop being afraid of change. Women, LGBTQ+, communities of color, immigrants are not a threat. This is energy. Fear is your commodity, and ours is hope. Karoline spoke calmly, almost softly. Hope without roots is an illusion. My America is strong, free and based on the law. No strife, no identity agenda, no eternal apologies. I'm not afraid of change. I'm afraid of losing the essence. And I won't let that happen. The moderator closed the laptop. Thanks. It was a hot but honest broadcast. Thanks to both participants. Both women stood up. They didn't shake hands. Their eyes met again. Not with anger this time. With knowledge. The confrontation became personal, but not finished yet. Backstage at the Real Arena studio, the air was electrified. Assistants were rushing around with tablets. Cameramen were packing equipment. Producers were whispering in corners, reading the first digital reactions. Karoline Leavitt was standing by her makeup mirror when her chief strategist, Michael Turner, approached her. He handed her the tablet. You blew it up. Look. X, Instagram, even TikTok, they all chop up your phrases. Hope without roots is an illusion is already at the top. And yes, CNN is already trying to spin this as cold fanaticism. But in the comments, people applaud. Karoline glanced at the screen, but didn't smile. She just nodded calmly. Let them spin it. The main thing is that the audience understood that I am not afraid to speak directly. Do you want to go further? Michael asked, staring intently. Of course, she replied. If Crockett is ready for war, then I'm ready for the campaign. In another part of the building, in another dressing room, Jasmine Crockett sat with her elbows on her knees, not touching the glass of water that was handed to her. Her PR director, Naomi, was pacing from corner to corner. It wasn't a disaster, but it wasn't a victory either. Karoline is tougher than you thought. She doesn't just talk, she hits. We need to change our strategy. With emotions, you're strong. But she's overstaying the facts. Jasmine nodded irritably. I know. I underestimated how aggressive she would be. And I'm sure. It's worse than that, Naomi added, showing the screen. She got into the target audience. Middle-aged, conservative women, even those who don't support Trump. They write. Finally, someone speaks without hysteria. What about us? Crockett asked. We arouse sympathy. But it doesn't turn into support. Jasmine exhaled. Then you need to hit her where she is vulnerable. To show that there is no empathy behind this armor. That she is not a people, but a cold product of the elite. Meanwhile, on the news channels, analysts were vying to discuss the broadcast. Karoline Leavitt is not just ready for debates, she shapes them. Today's broadcast may be the beginning of her large-scale political campaign, said one of the Fox News hosts. It was aggressive, even harsh in some places. But she sounded confident, and she managed to put Crockett on the defensive for almost the entire duration of the broadcast, said a political analyst with Newsmax. Even a neutral NBC wrote, Jasmine Crockett looked passionate, but at times emotionally unstable. Leavitt is prudent and disciplined. In the eyes of an independent viewer, this is an advantage. The very next morning, Karoline gave a brief interview for the Daily Ledger. I didn't come to be liked. I came to defend the country. If someone thinks it's cold, so be it. But a cold truth is better than a warm lie. Meanwhile, her staff was launching a new initiative, a national tour under the slogan, Return the Essence to America. Small towns, large universities and media platforms. The plan was clear. To use the waves after the debate and turn them into a tsunami. Jasmine was not far behind. Her team has announced a series of meetings with young people in major cities, Atlanta, Detroit, Chicago. Slogan. The heart of change. But not everyone around her was optimistic. Behind closed doors, the advisors argued, if she loses live again, it will be the end. Then let him keep it simple. Fewer slogans means more stories. Let her show that she is alive, and not an ideological doll. At that time, Karoline was preparing for her next big move. A live debate with an audience where viewers would be able to ask questions of both politicians directly. Without a script, without a grid of questions. Only the people and the truth. She looked at Michael and asked, will Jasmine accept the challenge? He chuckled. He will. She has no way out. But this time, she will come already wounded. Karoline nodded and whispered, then I'll finish it. The morning after the stormy broadcast, Jasmine Crockett sat alone in her office at headquarters. The walls were decorated with photos from campaigns, brilliant events, and the happy faces of supporters. But none of them could lift her spirits today. She stared out the window at the bustle of the street, lost in her own thoughts. On the table in front of her was a stack of notes and documents she was going to work with. But their words did not fit in my head. Instead, Karoline's words rang in my ears, her confident and sharp answers. Why couldn't I answer? Why couldn't I say what I really felt? Clasping her hands, Jasmine looked at her reflection in the glass. She was tired. Her eyes betrayed fatigue, not only physical but also emotional. She felt trapped between the demands of her team, the expectations of the voters, and her own desire to be real. I need to change something, she muttered to herself. At that moment, her PR director, Naomi, entered the room. She was holding a tablet in her hands, already preparing to start the morning meeting. Jasmine, we need to talk about the reaction after the broadcast. Polls show that many people consider you too soft after the debate, she said, breaking the silence. You need to change your approach, otherwise you will lose support. Jasmine looked up and answered, a little nervously, I know, Naomi, but I don't want to be tough. I don't want to be perceived as evil. I want people to see me for who I am. Naomi shook her head. But you can't be who you were when it doesn't work. You have to choose between sincerity and victory. Crockett, noticing her assistant's tone, relaxed her tension and replied softly, I do not know how to play this game. I'm not Karoline Leavitt. I can't just hit. I want my truth to be heard, but how? Naomi sat on the edge of the table and, looking into Jasmine's eyes, tried to calm her down. You can be sincere, but that doesn't mean you have to give up. Find your own style. For example, tell me your story. People love personal stories. Make it personal. Jasmine thought about it. A new thought crept into her head, a story. She had her own story. A story of struggle, overcoming, and hope. She recalled how, as a child, she saw her mother working several jobs to provide for her family. She remembered those who had no chance, but fought for them. She recalled her struggle for elections, for justice. Okay, she finally said, lifting her head. Let's do this. I'll tell you my story. I will show that not only words stand behind me, but also life. Naomi smiled as if she saw a light at the end of a tunnel. Great. We can use this story as a basis for future events. Let's choose a few moments from your life that really concern people. We can build a new message around this. Jasmine nodded and, suddenly delighted, began typing on her tablet. I will remember how my parents worked, how they fought to give me a chance. How it all relates to what we have to do now. That's it, Naomi praised. We are on the right track again. That evening, Jasmine took to the streets of her hometown. She wanted to feel how her community lived. She walked past familiar places, and old memories washed over her like waves. She went into the cafe where her mom worked. Nostalgia enveloped her, but at the same time inspiration came. Reflecting on how her mother fought for every penny to give her daughter an opportunity, Jasmine realized, this is exactly what she should do. She must show that she understands the difficulties of ordinary people. The next day, inspired by this thought, she gathered with the team to discuss strategy. They decided to create a series of videos where Jasmine would share personal stories, about her family, about difficulties, about what it means to fight for her rights and the rights of others. I want people to see me for who I am, she told the team. I'm not just a politician. I am a daughter, I am a sister, I am a woman. I am a part of this struggle. Naomi nodded approvingly. We will focus on the fact that you are real. You understand what it's like to work, what it's like to fight. It can attract attention and create a connection with people. When the videos started airing, Jasmine felt her confidence rise. Her words began to resonate. People shared their stories, commented, and supported. She wasn't trying to be perfect, she was just herself. The next step is to prepare for a new round of debates with Karoline. Jasmine knew that she needed to face her opponent again, but now she had a new strategy. She wasn't going to deviate from her truth and history, but rather show them with pride. She felt ready like never before. I'm going on stage with renewed vigor, she whispered to herself, looking in the mirror. I won't just be Jasmine Crockett. I will be the voice of those who feel forgotten. I will be my real self. The preparation for the debate this time was intense, but Jasmine Crockett felt completely different. Her team gathered all the ideas based on personal history and turned them into convincing arguments supported by facts. She used every minute to hone her performances, focusing on what she represented rather than just criticizing her opponent. The day of the debate has finally arrived. The studio was filled with an atmosphere of expectation. Jasmine stood backstage, her heart pounding, but her head was clear. She wasn't afraid, she was ready. When she came on stage, the excitement receded. The audience greeted her with appreciative applause, and Jasmine felt her confidence returning. She glanced at Karoline Leavitt, who was sitting across from her, stone-faced, ready to attack. The moderator started with questions about the economy. Jasmine, knowing that this was where Karoline felt at home, tried to seize the initiative. Our economy should work for everyone, Jasmine began, raising her voice. We need to focus on job creation, affordable housing, and reforms that will help small businesses. We must return control to the people. Karoline didn't take long. You talk about jobs, but your party supports decisions that undermine our economy. You want to increase taxes, while ordinary Americans are already suffering from high prices. How will this help them? Jasmine thought about her parents, how they worked to provide for the family. She took a step forward, her voice becoming firm. I grew up in a family where every dollar counted. But I know that millions of people, like my family, work their hardest and still can't make ends meet. We shouldn't punish them, we should support them. The room was filled with noise, and Jasmine felt her words resonate. She continued. I'm talking about giving people the opportunity to earn money, so that they have a real opportunity to choose. I'm talking about justice, which should not depend on skin color or place of birth. Karoline chuckled, but Jasmine was no longer afraid of her laughter. I agree that everyone deserves a chance, she replied, but that doesn't mean we should leave our borders open and let criminals come here with impunity. You need to sort out your priorities. Jasmine leaned a little closer to Karoline, as if trying to establish personal contact. I know that safety is important. But the real fear is not knowing how to feed your family, it's not having access to education. I want to create a society where we have both security and opportunity. The scene heated up, the questions became more and more pointed, and both women began to go beyond the usual rhetoric. You can only imagine those who could afford it, Karoline exclaimed. What about those outside your bubble? Jasmine was not at a loss. I represent people who are fighting for their rights. I represent those who don't have a chance because the system has betrayed them. I'm not just a candidate. I am their voice. This moment was a turning point. The audience exploded in applause. Karoline felt the ground give out from under her feet, but she tried to hold on. I want you to remember that there are consequences behind every decision. And you continue to promote illusions that will lead to decline. But Jasmine was ready for it. And I want you to remember that your words are just words. I'm here to show the actions and results. We can and must do better. The final words of both candidates sounded confident, but the audience was already on Jasmine's side. The support of the audience became obvious, and it inspired her. That evening, when the debate ended, both women were happy with their performance, but only one of them came out with fire in her eyes. Jasmine felt that she had found her true voice, and it became stronger with every word she said. A few days after the debate, the teams reconvened in Jasmine's office. The emotions after the success hadn't subsided yet when they started discussing the strategy for the future. Polls show an increase in support, Naomi said, looking at the screen. But we need not to miss this moment. We have to keep talking about real problems, about real people. Jasmine nodded, her heart filled with excitement. I want to meet with the voters. Have a few meetings where I can talk and listen. It's not just about winning. It's about giving hope back to people. Naomi nodded approvingly, and the rest of the team exchanged glances. We are ready to support you. Let's do it together. Jasmine, inspired again, felt that her battle was just beginning. Now she's not just fighting for elections. It was a movement filled with meaning and energy that was supposed to inspire everyone. That night, looking at the stars outside the window, Jasmine knew that despite the obstacles, she had chosen her path. And now she's ready to fight for him, for her people, and for her future. Election day had arrived, and tension was in the air. The whole country froze in anticipation of the results. Jasmine Crockett, overcome with excitement and hope, sat in her headquarters surrounded by her team. The room was filled with screens with live broadcasts and news updates. We did everything we could, Naomi said, looking at her charge. Now everything depends on the voters. Jasmine nodded, her heart pounding. She knew that she had done everything possible to convey her ideas and her story to people. Now all she had to do was wait. As the hours passed, the first results began to appear on the screens. Vote counts have begun in different states. At first, Crockett was favored by news from major cities, where her support was strongest. She was relieved to see the charts and polls that showed her increasing chances. "We are on the right track," she screamed when a message about winning in New York appeared on the screen. There were shouts of joy and applause from the team. But then came the news from rural areas and conservative counties. Karoline Leavitt also showed strong results, and this was starting to cause concern. "We need to get together," said Michael, their strategist, as the results began to falter. "If we lose in key states, it could be a problem." Jasmine felt the tension building. She knew that every voice mattered. Thoughts raced through her mind about how she could appeal to the voters once again to convince them of her position. "We still have time," she said, trying to calm the team down. "Let's put forward our story. Our platform is based on real people and real problems." With each new count, it became obvious that it would be a struggle until the last minute. There was a commotion in Jasmine's headquarters. The team kept updating the information, and finally it was time for her to take the stage to address the voters. Jasmine came to the microphone, her voice sounding confident, even though everything was shaking inside. "Thank you to everyone who came today, who voted and supported us. We are on the threshold of a historic moment, and this is just the beginning. We are not just fighting for a seat in Congress, we are fighting for the hearts and minds of people, for their rights and their future." The audience began to applaud. Jasmine felt their energy filling her and continued. "I promise you that I will fight for every word, for every opportunity, for each of you. These are not just words, but our common path. And I'm here to make sure that no one is left behind." Meanwhile, there was also an atmosphere of expectation at Karoline Leavitt's headquarters. She clasped her hands, listening to each report of the results. Her team was full of confidence, and the picture began to clear up. "We're leading in key states," one of her assistants said, "but it can still change." Karoline remained focused. She knew that her political career depended heavily on these elections. When the results started coming in, she stood up and addressed her team. "We did our best. I am proud of what we have built. But we have to be prepared for anything." In the evening, when the results continued to arrive, the phone rang. Jasmine came back to the microphone to share the latest news. "We are at the last stage of the vote count," she began. "And this is becoming a real challenge. But I believe in the strength of our people. I believe that we can change the country for the better." Applause filled the room, and the team happily began celebrating, even despite the uncertainty. At the end of the evening, the results finally began to add up. Important states like Pennsylvania and Michigan started showing support for Crockett, and it came as a real shock to her rivals. When the results were finally summed up, the picture became clear. Jasmine Crockett became the winner, and Karoline Leavitt was forced to admit defeat. It was an emotional time for both women, and despite the difference in their views, each of them knew that this was not just an election battle, but a symbol of deeper changes in the country. Jasmine stood on the stage, surrounded by the team, and looked at the crowd, who applauded. She understood that there was still a lot of work ahead, but this moment was a real triumph for her. "Thank you all," she screamed, clutching the microphone. "We did it together. This is just the beginning, and I promise to fight for you." At the Leavitt headquarters, the team was also full of emotions. Karoline, although disappointed, understood that this was not the end, but only a new chapter. "We've learned a lot," she said, looking back at her assistants. "This is not our last battle. We'll be back." After all, the elections were over, and each of the women knew that they would move forward. Their confrontation became a symbol of change, and they both left their mark on the history of their country.